Sarah Chen squinted through the rain-streaked windows of her research station, the dense Oregon forest barely visible in the pre-dawn gloom. Her fingers wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee as she reviewed overnight data from her xenobiology experiments. 3 years into her graduate research on extraterrestrial plant adaptation, she'd grown accustomed to the solitude of the remote facility. The quiet shattered as her sensors lit up like a Christmas tree. Atmospheric disturbance detected, the AI assistant announced. Unknown object entering regional airspace. Sarah abandoned her coffee and rushed to the monitoring station. The readings made no sense. The energy signature didn't match any known human craft, and the trajectory was far too erratic for a meteor. A brilliant flash illuminated the forest canopy, followed by the deep boom of impact. The ground trembled beneath her feet. Without hesitation, Sarah grabbed her emergency med kit and research tablet. Someone or something had just crashed less than a kilometer from her station, and if it was what she suspected, they might need help. The rain had turned to a light drizzle as she picked her way through the underbrush, following the trail of broken branches and scorched vegetation. The smell of ozone and burned metal grew stronger with each step. Finally, she emerged into a small clearing carved by the impact. Her breath caught in her throat. Half buried in the soft earth lay a sleek silver pod, its surface etched with intricate patterns that seemed to shift in the dim light. Definitely not human technology. Steam hissed from several ruptures in its hull, and a faint purple glow emanated from within. "Hello," she called out, approaching cautiously. "I'm here to help if you need it." A panel on the pod's surface rippled like liquid mercury and dissolved, revealing the interior. Sarah's scientific mind barely had time to marvel at the technology before her medical training kicked in. Inside lay a clearly injured Valaxian, one of the most enigmatic species humanity had encountered since first contact. The alien's crystalline skin, usually a brilliant azure, had dulled to a sickly gray. Its chest rose and fell in rapid, shallow movements. Sarah had studied Valaxian biology, but nothing in her research had prepared her for treating one in person. "Can you understand me?" she asked, kneeling beside the pod. The Valaxian's multifaceted eyes focused on her briefly before closing again. A weak harmonic tone emanated from its thoracic resonance chamber, their equivalent of speech, but too faint for her to make out. Sarah's tablet chirped, detecting a weak transmission. Symbols scrolled across her screen, automatically translating. Diplomatic vessel. Ambush. Must deliver. Prevent war. Her heart raced. This wasn't just any crashed alien. This was someone important, someone carrying crucial information. And they were dying. Sarah pulled out her medkit and began scanning the Valaxians' vital signs. Their biology was silicon-based, requiring entirely different medical approaches than human physiology. But the basic principles remained the same. Stop any bleeding, stabilize breathing, prevent shock. She spotted the problem immediately. A crystalline shard had penetrated the alien's thoracic cavity, disrupting their natural resonance patterns. Without those vibrations, their entire metabolic system would shut down. "I'm going to help you," she said firmly, more to steady herself than for the barely conscious alien's benefit. "But this might hurt." Sarah pulled out a sonic resonator from her kit, standard equipment for studying crystalline alien life forms. With trembling fingers, she adjusted it to match the Valaxian's natural frequency, which she'd memorized during her studies. One wrong move, and she could shatter their entire crystalline structure. The alien's eyes snapped open as she activated the device. A harmonic screech filled the air, but Sarah held steady, watching her readings. Slowly, the Valaxian's natural resonance began to stabilize, their color shifting from gray back toward blue. "Gratitude," the translation flickered across her tablet. "But danger comes." As if on cue, a low rumble filled the air. Sarah looked up to see 3 black aircraft emerging from the clouds, their designs unlike anything in the human military registry. The Valaxian's message became urgent. "They cannot find Data Crystal. War will begin. Millions die." Sarah made a split-second decision. "Can you move? We need to get you to my research station." The aliens struggled to rise, their crystalline form catching the first rays of dawn. Sarah supported them as best she could, noting how surprisingly light they were despite their appearance. "Protect Crystal." The Valaxian pressed a small object into her hand, a shard that seemed to pulse with stored information. "Trust you." The aircraft were growing closer. Sarah helped the alien to their feet, her mind racing. Her research station had shielding against most scans, necessary for her sensitive experiments. If they could reach it. "Lean on me," she said, securing her grip around what passed for the Valaxian's waist. "I don't know what's going on, but I promise I'll help you." As they stumbled through the forest, Sarah realized her quiet research life had just become infinitely more complicated. But looking at the wounded alien beside her, she knew she'd made the right choice. Sometimes the most important scientific discoveries weren't the ones you went looking for, but the ones that came crashing into your world unannounced. The black aircraft began their descent as Sarah and the ambassador disappeared into the dense forest canopy. The race to prevent an interstellar war had begun, and an unlikely pair of allies were all that stood between peace and chaos. The research station's backup generator hummed as Sarah sealed the blast doors. She killed the main power to avoid detection, leaving only essential life support systems running. In the dim emergency lighting, the Valaxian ambassador's crystalline form cast shifting patterns across the laboratory walls. "The shielding should hold," Sarah said, checking her tablet's readings. "But those ships are still circling." She'd managed to get them inside just as the aircraft began their sweep of the area. But she knew it was only a matter of time before they expanded their search. The ambassador had collapsed onto her examination table, their azure color fading again. "Gratitude." The translation flickered across her tablet. "Am Kelxar, diplomatic envoy to Earth's Southeast Asian Alliance." "Sarah Chin," she replied, already preparing more sophisticated medical equipment. "Xenobiology researcher, and apparently now an accomplice in galactic politics." A sound emerged from Kelxar that her tablet translated as laughter, though it came out as a crystalline chiming. "Humans, always with humor in darkness." The levity vanished as Kelxar's form shuddered, cracks spreading from their wound. Sarah rushed forward with her instruments, but the ambassador raised a crystalline hand to stop her. "Must understand first." Kelxar's resonance was growing weaker. "Data crystal contains proof. Peace treaty sabotage. Both sides manipulated." Sarah glanced at the crystal she tucked into her lab coat pocket. It seemed to pulse in response to her touch, warm against her skin. "Who's trying to start this war?" "Those ships up there. Mercenaries, hired by coalition. Profit from conflict." Kelxar's color dimmed further. "Need medical stasis, but must share knowledge first. If I terminate." "You're not terminating on my watch," Sarah said firmly. She pulled up everything she had on Valaxian physiology on her tablet. "Look, I know your species uses crystalline resonance to maintain biological functions. I've been studying similar structures in xenobotany. Maybe if we—" A violent tremor ran through Kelxar's form. Sarah abandoned her tablet and grabbed her more sophisticated resonator. "I'm going to try something. It might hurt, but it's better than watching you crack apart." She adjusted the device to emit a complex harmonizing frequency, one she'd developed for her plant experiments. It wasn't designed for Valaxian biology, but the principles were similar. As the resonance filled the room, Kelxar's breathing steadied. "Remarkable." The translation appeared. "Using botanical research to stabilize silicon life form." "Science is science," Sarah replied, fine-tuning the frequency. "Life wants to persist, whether it's carbon-based, silicon-based, or something we haven't discovered yet. The patterns are often similar." The cracks in Kelxar's form began to stabilize, though they didn't heal completely. Sarah knew she was only buying time, but time was what they needed most right now. A deep boom shook the station. Sarah rushed to her security feeds. The black aircraft had landed in the clearing, and figures in sleek combat suits were emerging. They will kill to retrieve crystal, Kelxar warned. Cannot let them find. Sarah's mind raced. Her station was well equipped for research, but not for defending against armed mercenaries. She needed a plan. Tell me about this crystal, she said, gathering essential supplies into a bag. What exactly does it prove? Kelxar's response came in stronger now, stabilized by the resonator. Recorded negotiations. Proves artificial manipulation. Trading algorithms corrupted. False flags planted. Perfect deception. Both sides think the other is preparing for war, Sarah realized. When really, war profiteers, Kelxar confirmed. Selling weapons to both sides, staging incidents, need crystal to reach Earth's Central Council. Another explosion rocked the station. The mercenaries were trying to breach the outer doors. Sarah checked her tablet. The station's shielding was holding, but it wouldn't last forever. There's a network of maintenance tunnels under the station, she said, slinging her pack over her shoulder. They lead to an old bunker from when this was a military research facility. We might be able to. A piercing alarm cut through the air. Sarah's heart sank as she read the warning on her screen. They're using sonic disruptors. They'll shatter the station's crystalline power core. And me with it, Kelxar added grimly. Sarah looked at her resonator, then at her research notes. An idea forming. It was theoretical, dangerous, and probably impossible. But right now, impossible seemed better than certain death. Your people can transfer consciousness through crystalline matrices, right? She asked, already pulling equipment from her shelves. It's how you store and share memories. Yes, but the data crystal you gave me, it's not just a recording, is it? It's a complete neural imprint of the negotiations. Kelxar's form shifted in what Sarah had learned to recognize as surprise. Correct. Complete sensory and memory engrams. Sarah held up a large crystal she'd been growing for her experiments. Then I have an idea, but you're going to have to trust me. And more importantly, she met Kelxar's multifaceted gaze. You're going to have to teach me how to lie to a mercenary squad in the next 5 minutes. Above them, the sonic disruptors began their work, sending vibrations through the station structure. Time was running out, and Sarah's crazy plan was their only hope. As she began connecting equipment, she wondered if her graduate advisors had ever imagined her xenobotany research would be used quite like this. The sound of breaking glass echoed from above, followed by heavy footsteps. Sarah's hands moved faster, guided by scientific knowledge and desperate inspiration. Sometimes, the craziest experiments yielded the most remarkable results, assuming you lived long enough to publish them. The maintenance tunnels echoed with the sound of boots above as Sarah clutched her modified research crystal. Inside its lattice structure now resided both the diplomatic data and a fractional consciousness transfer from Kelxar, an improvised solution that had worked better than she'd dared hope. The ambassador's physical form lay inert in the lab above, a decoy that would buy them precious time. Sarah had reprogrammed her equipment to emit false life signs, a trick she'd learned from studying crystalline organisms that could enter dormant states. Impressive adaptation. Kelxar's thoughts resonated through the crystal in her hands, using biological mimicry principles. Save your energy, Sarah whispered, navigating the dark tunnels by memory. That consciousness transfer was incomplete. I don't know how long the crystal matrix will hold. A massive boom shook dust from the tunnel ceiling. They'd breached the lab. Sarah picked up her pace, grateful for the years she'd spent mapping these old military passages for her research site surveys. Her tablet vibrated, an incoming transmission, heavily encrypted. She hesitated before accepting it. Dr. Chen. The voice was familiar. Dr. Marcus Webb, her supposed liaison with the Earth Science Council. I'm seeing some concerning energy signatures from your station. Care to explain? Sarah's mind raced. Webb had always been too interested in her crystalline research, asking questions that went beyond simple academic curiosity. Careful. Kelxar's warning resonated. Webb's signature matches. corruption algorithms. Just a containment breach in the xenobotany lab, Sarah replied smoothly. Had to purge some samples. You know how unstable crystalline life forms can be. Indeed. Webb's tone was ice. Stay where you are. A security team is en route to assist. Those aren't security forces up there, are they, Dr. Webb? Sarah fought to keep her voice steady. They're the same people who corrupted the trade negotiations, the ones who stand to make billions from an interstellar war. Silence stretched for a moment. You've always been too clever for your own good, Sarah. If you'd stuck to your plans, you might have had a brilliant career ahead of you. And if you'd stuck to science instead of war profiteering, you might have kept your soul. Webb's laugh was hollow. Do you have any idea what technology is worth on an interstellar scale? Earth is a backwater. Dr. Chen. The only way we'll ever compete is through conflict. War drives innovation, forces advancement. Sarah reached a junction in the tunnels, checking her tablet's map, and makes certain people very, very rich. The crystal, Sarah. Hand it over, and I'll ensure you're well compensated for your discretion. A burst of resonance from the crystal caught her attention. Keltzer was showing her something. Memories of peaceful Valaxian technologies, medical advancements, innovations born from cooperation rather than conflict. You're wrong about Earth being a backwater, she said, making her choice. We don't need war to advance. We just need to stop people like you from holding us back. She cut the transmission as shouts echoed through the tunnels. They'd found the access point. Junction ahead. Keltzer's thoughts guided her. Emergency exit. Sarah sprinted forward, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The crystal pulsed with increasing urgency in her hands. Matrix destabilizing. Consciousness fragmenting. Hold on, she pleaded, reaching the exit. It was sealed with a heavy mechanical lock. No electronic system to hack. Footsteps pounded behind her. A beam of light cut through the darkness. Sarah pulled out her resonator, adjusting it to match the crystal's frequency. If she was right about the lock's metallurgical composition, the crystal's light flared as she pressed it against the lock, channeling the resonator's energy through it. The metal began to vibrate, then crack. There she is. The lock shattered just as the first shots rang out. Sarah slammed through the door into the pre-dawn forest, running on pure adrenaline. Coordinates. Keltzer's thoughts were growing fainter. Sanctuary. 3 kilometers north. Sarah ran, her mind working furiously. Webb hadn't acted alone. Someone high up had to be protecting him, facilitating the manipulation of both human and Valaxian diplomatic channels. The crystal flickered. Limited time. Consciousness fading. Trust yourself. I'm not losing you two, Sarah growled, pushing herself harder. She'd started this trying to save one life. Now she was trying to save millions. Somewhere in this crystal was proof of a conspiracy that threatened both their species. A low hum filled the air, aircraft rising above the trees. Sarah dove under a fallen log as searchlights swept the forest. She looked at her tablet, plotting a course north while avoiding the most obvious paths. She wasn't a diplomat or a soldier. She was a scientist. But right now, that might be exactly what both their worlds needed. As she moved through the underbrush, Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. Webb had been right about one thing. She should have stuck to her plants, because studying how life adapted to survive had taught her more about persisting against impossible odds than any combat training could have. The crystal pulsed weakly in her hands, and Sarah made a silent promise to both Keltzer and herself. She would find this sanctuary. She would expose the truth. And she would prove that humanity's greatest strength wasn't its capacity for war, but its ability to reach across the stars and forge connections that transcended biology itself. Behind her, boots crushed undergrowth as the hunt continued. Above, aircraft crisscrossed the brightening sky, and somewhere ahead lay answers that could prevent an interstellar war if she could stay alive long enough to find them. Dawn painted the forest in shades of gold as Sarah reached the coordinates Kelxar had provided. Her legs trembled with exhaustion, and the crystal in her hands had grown dangerously dim. What looked like an abandoned ranger station stood before her, its wooden walls weathered by decades of rain. Press crystal. Against north wall. Kelxar's thoughts were barely a whisper now. Sarah stumbled forward, her scientific mind still cataloging details despite her exhaustion. The wall's texture was wrong, not wood at all, but a sophisticated biomimetic material. When she pressed the crystal against it, patterns of light rippled outward like waves on a pond. A doorway materialized, revealing a sleek interior that definitely wasn't standard Forest Service issue. Sarah practically fell inside as the entrance sealed behind her. Life form detected. Processing. A soft voice filled the air. Human physiology confirmed. Crystalline matrix detected. Emergency protocols initiated. The room transformed around her. Medical equipment emerged from hidden compartments, and a crystalline chamber rose from the floor, humming with familiar resonances. Place crystal. In chamber. Kelxar's presence was fading fast. Will stabilize. Sarah's hand shook as she set the crystal into the chamber. Energy fields sparkled to life, and the crystal's glow steadied, then brightened. Consciousness stabilization in progress. The facility's AI announced. Processing diplomatic data package. Sarah sank into a chair that appeared beneath her, finally allowing herself to breathe. They'd made it. Whatever this place was, they were safe for the moment. Holographic displays flickered to life around her, showing streams of data. Trade agreements, diplomatic exchanges, financial transactions, all corrupted by subtle manipulations that had pushed both species toward war. Viewing station activated. Kelxar's thoughts were stronger now. Watch. The air filled with three-dimensional images, recorded memories from the peace negotiations. Sarah saw Kelxar and other diplomats, both human and Valaxian, working to bridge cultural gaps. But in the background, barely noticeable, were familiar faces. That's Webb, she breathed, watching him slip something into a computer terminal. And, oh God, Admiral Helena Chen, her own aunt, head of Earth's Southeast Asian Alliance Defense Force, accepting what was clearly a bribe from a figure whose face was obscured. Deeper, look deeper, Kelxar urged. The scenes shifted, showing more players in the conspiracy. Corporate executives, military leaders, even supposed peace activists, all manipulated by a single organization that straddled both human and Valaxian space. The consortium, the AI supplied. A multi-species collective dedicated to promoting conflict for profit. They have operated in shadows for decades, seeding discord between emerging spacefaring civilizations. Sarah's mind reeled. This goes beyond just Earth and the Valaxians, doesn't it? Have done this before, Kelxar confirmed. Dozens of species. Countless wars. The facility's displays showed more evidence, records of similar manipulations on other worlds, all following the same pattern. Create tension, supply weapons to both sides, profit from the inevitable conflict, then move on to new victims. Why this sanctuary? Sarah asked, watching the data scroll past. Why hide all this here? Peaceful resistance. Kelxar's thoughts grew clearer as the crystal stabilized. Organization of those who learn truth, gathering evidence, waiting for right moment. And the right allies, Sarah realized. She wasn't the first human to find this place. Other faces appeared in the records. Scientists, diplomats, soldiers, all who had discovered fragments of the truth and chosen to act. A new alert flashed across the displays. The AI's voice turned urgent. Multiple aircraft approaching. Military signatures detected. Sarah's heart sank. Webb must have called in official forces, with my aunt's help. Not over. Kelxar's presence strengthened further. Sanctuary has defenses, and we have truth. Sarah stood, her exhaustion forgotten as she studied the facility's systems. Her scientific training kicked in, analyzing patterns, finding connections. The consortium relies on secrecy, on making everyone think they're alone in discovering this. Yes, then we don't need to fight them. A plan began forming in her mind. We just need to expose them, all at once, everywhere. She turned to the facility's communication array. This place is connected to similar sanctuaries around Earth and in Valaxian space, isn't it? All gathering evidence, all waiting for the right moment. Correct, but transmission would be traced. Let them trace it. Sarah's fingers flew over the controls, her years of research experience guiding her through the alien interface. Every transmission they try to stop will only confirm the data's authenticity. Outside, the sound of aircraft grew louder. Heavy footsteps surrounded the building. "This is Admiral Chen." A familiar voice boomed through hidden speakers. "Dr. Chen, by the authority of the Earth Defense Force, you are ordered to surrender." Sarah looked at the crystal holding Kelxer's consciousness, then at the wealth of evidence surrounding them. "You know what really drives innovation, Admiral. Not war. Connection. Understanding. The desire to reach across the void and find common ground." She pressed the final command. And the truth always finds a way to connect. The facility hummed as it began broadcasting, not just to Earth or Valaxian channels, but to every communication network in range. Evidence of the consortium's manipulation began flooding news feeds, secure channels, and public networks across 2 civilizations. "Final warning, Dr. Chen." Sarah stood straight, facing the door. Sometimes the most important discoveries weren't made in laboratories, but in moments of crisis. And sometimes the greatest acts of science weren't about understanding the universe, but about helping it understand itself. "No, Admiral," she said quietly. "This is your final warning. Because in about 30 seconds, everyone is going to know exactly what we've been fighting for." The truth was loose now, spreading faster than any attempt to contain it. And as alarms began blaring on every ship and station in range, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The real war had never been between humans and Valaxians. It had been between truth and lies, between those who profited from division and those who sought connection. And with a single broadcast, the balance was about to shift. The door began to glow as cutting tools attacked it from outside. Sarah squared her shoulders, ready to face whatever came next. She was a scientist, after all, and this was about to become the experiment of a lifetime. The door held longer than Sarah expected, long enough for the first waves of data to take root across the networks, long enough for the truth to become unstoppable. When it finally burst inward in a shower of sparks, the scene that greeted Admiral Chen wasn't what she planned. Every surface in the sanctuary glowed with projected evidence of her involvement with the consortium. Her own face, her own voice, her own signature on documents that could never be erased. "It's over, Helena," Sarah said quietly, standing beside the crystalline chamber holding Kelxer's consciousness. "The consortium's game ends today." The Admiral's strike team shifted uncomfortably as their own comm devices flooded with revelations. Behind them, Webb appeared, his face ashen. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he snarled. "The chaos you've just unleashed." A new voice filled the sanctuary, deep, resonant, and very much not human. "She has done exactly what was needed." The crystalline chamber pulsed with light as Kelxer's consciousness manifested as a holographic form. What all of us should have done long ago. Warning signals flashed across the facility's displays. Above them, new ships were entering orbit, massive Valaxian vessels responding to the data breach. But they weren't alone. Multiple ships dropping out of FTL, the AI announced. Signatures detected from 15 different species, all approaching Earth orbit. Sarah's tablet lit up with incoming transmissions, not just from Earth or Valaxian sources, but from across the galaxy. Other sanctuaries were responding, other witnesses stepping forward. The consortium's careful web of manipulation was unraveling in real time. Admiral Chen lowered her weapon, her military bearing crumbling as she watched decades of conspiracy collapse. "We thought we were protecting Earth," she whispered. "They convinced us we needed the advantage, by making sure we'd never trust each other enough to see the real threat." Sarah finished. She walked to her aunt, taking the gun from her unresisting hands. "But that ends now." The sanctuary's communications array crackled with new voices: Earth's Central Council, Valaxian High Command, and representatives from a dozen other species, all demanding answers, all finally seeing the truth. The cycle breaks. Kelxar's hologram grew stronger as more power flowed into the chamber. But what comes next requires courage. Sarah looked at the assembled humans, and the data still streaming across the displays. "We show them a better way. Not just humans and Valaxians, but all of us. We take everything the consortium tried to hide. Medical breakthroughs, clean energy, faster than light innovations. And we share it. That technology is worth trillions," Webb protested weakly. "The markets will crash." "Good." Sarah's voice was steel. "We'll build new ones, based on cooperation instead of conflict, on connection instead of fear." The sanctuary's AI interrupted. Incoming transmission from Combined Fleet Command. They're requesting Dr. Chen by name." Sarah straightened her lab coat, suddenly aware of how disheveled she looked after hours of running through the forest. "Put them through." The air filled with holograms, human admirals, Valaxian elders, and representatives from species she'd never seen before, all looking at her with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "Dr. Chen," the Earth Council representative began, "you've just exposed the largest conspiracy in human history. What do you propose we do about it?" Sarah glanced at Kelxar's hologram, which nodded encouragingly. She took a deep breath. "We do what scientists have always done," she said. "We observe, we learn, we share what we discover, and most importantly," she met each alien gaze in turn, "we admit when we've been wrong and work together to find a better way forward." She gestured to the wealth of data surrounding them. "The consortium thrived because they convinced us we were alone, that we had to fight to survive. But look around this room. Look at your own sanctuaries, your own witnesses coming forward. We were never alone. We just needed the courage to reach out." One by one, the representatives nodded. Orders were given. Around the planet, forces that had been preparing for war began standing down. Ships that had been ready to fire on each other started sharing coordinates of consortium bases instead. "There will be chaos," Admiral Chen warned, watching the screens. "The economy will adapt," Sarah finished. "Life always does." "Isn't that right, Kelxar?" The hologram chimed in agreement. "And we will help it adapt, together." Hours later, as joint human-alien teams began sweeping up consortium cells across the planet, Sarah sat in the sanctuary's main chamber, finally allowing exhaustion to catch up with her. "You should rest." Kelxar's consciousness resonated gently from the crystal. "Soon." She studied the readings from the chamber. "First, we need to figure out how to get you back into a proper body. I have some ideas, based on my crystalline growth research." Always the scientist. "That's what saved us, isn't it?" She smiled. "Not weapons or armies, just the simple human desire to understand, to help, to connect." The crystal pulsed with what she now recognized as laughter. Perhaps that is humanity's greatest technology. Outside, the sun had fully risen. Through the sanctuary's windows, Sarah could see joint teams of humans and aliens working together, sharing information, beginning the long process of building trust. She thought about her quiet research station, about how she'd started this day, just wanting to study alien plants. Somehow, she'd ended up helping to change the course of human history. But isn't that what science was really about? Not just collecting data or running experiments, but using knowledge to make the universe a little bit better, a little bit more connected, a little bit more understood. "What next?" Kelxar asked. Sarah looked at her tablet, already filling with requests for her expertise in human-alien biology. The crystal matrix she'd improvised to save Kelxar had opened up entirely new fields of research. And there were so many species out there, so much to learn. Next, she said, we do what humanity does best. We explore, we discover. And this time, she smiled at the hologram of her alien friend. We do it together. The sanctuary hummed with possibility as the first light of a new era streamed through its windows. Outside, humanity was taking its first true steps into a larger galaxy. Not through war or conquest, but through the simple, profound act of reaching out to another life form and saying, "Let me help." In the end, that had made all the difference.